So thank you so much for joining us. This, of course, is an examination of AI and robotics in the local economy that has been spurred by a series of articles written by Insider Louisville's Boris Ladwig, who is in the back. He told me not to point him out, but I'm going to do it, so he's here. And this is where part of the unique, interesting challenge that we have at Insider Louisville is, as an online community, it's bridging that gap to offline. For years, people have been trying to take the offline experience online, and we kind of do the opposite. So as you have read and experienced these articles, what's the next way to get more immersed in this material? And that is to actually come in and to interact with some of the folks who are profiled and are leading experts in this area of AI and robotics. So a couple of housekeeping things real quickly. I'll tell you how we're going to do this tonight, and that is pretty straightforward. We're going to see 5 short presentations from our 5 panelists, who I will introduce shortly. They will walk us through some of the things that they're doing. Then I will come back and we will do a Q&A that you can be involved in. So again, this is about community and communication and conversation. So be thinking as you're listening questions that you might have, and we will do kind of an informal Q&A at the end and continue some of this conversation. A couple of thank yous, of course, to the University of Louisville for hosting and providing the speakers. Mark Hebert and your team, thank you so much. GE Appliances, Norton Healthcare, Humana, all represented on the stage tonight along with U of L. So thank you to them. And to you, if you are one of our over 500 individual sustaining members or one of our corporate members, I won't read you the whole list, but most recently in the fold, corporately supporting Insider Louisville, Edge Analytics, TARC, the American Heart Association, Mightily, Kentucky Derby Festival, Growth Coach, Heaven Hill Brands, and a whole lot more. And we are very thankful for those folks who make it possible for us to do what we're doing tonight, which is to examine these types of things in a public setting with you and have these conversations about how we can understand what's really happening in our city and strive to make it better. So thank you for being a part of that. We really appreciate you being here. And I will get us kicked off with our first speaker tonight, Dr. Dan Popa. Thank you.
All right, thank you and good afternoon. My name is Dan Popa. I'm a faculty member. Let's see. I'm a professor here at U of L in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. I have a lab, several labs actually, very close by here in the Shoemaker Research Building. Normally, I have a lot of robots in my lab. Sometimes I bring the robots out. I figured at this event, I'm just going to show you a few videos, actually lots of videos, and tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the area of robotics research. So the title of my talk is toward increasing the partnership between human and robots in the future. So hopefully that sets the tone. So first, I just want to walk you through some of the trends that we see right now in the area of robotics, and I'm speaking in the area of research in robotics. So what happens is things that are hot in research today will be out in the marketplace maybe 10 years from now, 5-10 years from now, maybe longer. So first of all, a big development is the rise of so-called co-robots. These are collaborative robots that essentially are designed to work with people in factories, healthcare facilities, and so on. Another big trend is instead of rigid metallic robots, people are actually working right now on soft robots. These are robots that you can wear, robots that you can sit on, robots that you can interact with in better ways. So naturally, these robots are realized with advanced materials and sensors, unlike the robots of the past. And the key here is that these robots need to understand and sense where the people are and how not to hurt them. Another key attribute of new robots are the fact that they adapt and learn, so they would like to learn about your preferences and how to better serve you. This is the purpose of these new types of machines. So there are many advantages. Robots will be safer, they'll have better awareness of what you want, and essentially they'll be better at performing tasks for you. There are many challenges in research related to cost and reliability and the economics of deploying these units, but I think that you're going to see more and more in the future. And there are many, many applications. that you see here. So social robotics, service robots, assistive robots, surgical robots. We've seen some of them already, and of course in manufacturing. So I want to point out to a few, several key events. So first is this event called DARPA Robotics Challenge. You may have heard of it, but it was run by DARPA about 5 years ago. And the goal was to design this scary looking robot called Atlas and use it in natural disaster environments. The idea behind this robot is that it will be human sized. It can use human tools to get into a place like the Fukushima nuclear reactor and save the world. So this research actually spurred a big wave of innovation in the US. And there are many videos and demonstrations that you can see. Some of them look quite scary, but the impact of this, it sort of energized the whole research community in the United States. So now going back to these robots that work together with people, here's some things that you can do with these robots. So first of all, you can teach them by demonstration. You can show them how to perform a task. So if you want to have a robot pour a glass of wine, you simply take it through the motions and show it how to pour the glass of wine, and then it'll do it for you after that. So that's what my PhD student's doing there with this robot called the Personal Robot 2, PR2 service robot. That's about human size. Anyway, this takes longer. It takes a while, and eventually the robot can pick up the glass and so on. We move on. Another thing that you can do with these robots is it allows for better, more intuitive human-machine interfaces. Some of these interfaces could be run off your tablet. Some of them are physical in the sense that you actually push the robot to guide it through the motions and so on. And some of these interfaces are very natural, like using facial expressions and gestures, head-eye coordination. In this video, you see one of my graduate students driving Philip K. Dick is a humanoid android using a Kinect, and you can see that essentially it's doing a mimicking motion. So very natural way to interact. So now a couple examples of projects. This one is recently completed. This was funded by the National Science Foundation. The objective was to create the next generation sensor, skin, and garments. So these are wearable, sensorized surfaces that you can put on the robot so that the robot will figure out what's touching it and where. So out of this came some technologies that we patented last year here at U of L, these robotic skin patches that you can put on the robot or on different objects. And another thing that came out of that grant is the fact that you can actually employ machine learning algorithms to for the robot to learn how to use the skin. So in other words, you don't have to pre-program these motions. You just stick the skin on the robot, and then you have the robot learn how to use the skin efficiently. We call that neuroadaptive control. And so what we're doing with this technology currently, we have a grant to create the next generation. We call it Adaptive Nursing Assistant. This is essentially a robot that's going to do two things. One is do patient sitting. The other one is patient walking in a medical facility. Another thing we're doing is we're working on very tiny robots. These are micro robots for nanotechnology. And the goal here is to take the size of the robot and shrink it down from a large size to a millimeter size. We have a grant from the National Science Foundation to do that. And here's an application. We're currently working on bin picking, automatic bin picking for order fulfillment. Essentially, this technology will be able to fulfill your orders at an Amazon warehouse. Right now, there's still people doing these tasks, which is taking, and I apologize, the videos here don't work. So here, one of the videos you see a robotic arm that we're setting up for essentially automatic object identification, picking up from a bin. And you see another robot that is doing something very similar with items that are in a vertical set of bins that you would see in a warehouse. Another application would be a wearable prosthetic device. Let's see if this works. Maybe not. We had a robot called Zeno that we use for autism interventions. It turns out that autistic kids are not threatened by robots, and they respond better to robots than people, and so we use that to our advantage. So let me just go to the conclusion. So I try to sum this up. Some robots will take jobs away from people. Let me just say that. 2 examples, one in logistics, the other one in transportation. This will occur for sure. However, some robots will actually preserve and increase productivity of some other types of jobs. So 2 examples, in manufacturing and in healthcare, this will happen. So I don't expect massive losses of jobs in these 2 sectors because of robots. And then some robots will actually create jobs, 2 examples in entertainment and service domains. And in general, you need more engineers and technicians to work and repair these robots. So there's plenty of robotics jobs that can be created in this industry. So I'd like to thank my student and staff at the Next Generation Systems Group and the National Science Foundation for some of these videos you saw today. Thank you.
Let's see if I can make it happen. I run around, so this is why. Okay, is this working? All right, so I got 5 minutes to tell you about 10 years of my research. This should work out pretty well. Just in case I don't finish all of it, you have an option to follow me. You can follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook. Just don't follow me home. It's very important, but you'll get all the information you need. So my research is in complementary area. I don't work with actual physical robots. I work with brains for robots, so artificial intelligence. And I think to a certain extent, we all experience it all the time, right? Your smartphone, if you see self-driving cars go by, pretty much anything Google does, all that is what we always called artificial intelligence. The problem is, a lot of times when we succeed in this field, we stop calling it AI, we call it something else. We call it spell checker, right? So kind of stops giving us credit for what we do. But definitely in combination with bodies, and I think Dr. Popa will tell you all about how advanced we can get in that domain, we can pretty much automate any job, I would argue, eventually. I don't think there is any limitations to what can be done long term. And in terms of not just physical capacity, but mental capacity, cognitive labor. What happens next after you get to human level? You quickly go beyond that, right? If you have someone with a person, a robot, capable of this level of performance, give them extra memory, give them extra access to internet, and essentially you have a super intelligent system. So it's not just science fiction at this point. There is significant amount of research and investment from governments, from top corporations into building those systems, general intelligence systems and super intelligent systems. And we haven't gotten to that point, but the progress has been amazing. And the progress is not just linear, it's exponential. What we accomplish in a year today previously took 10 years of research to get there. So again, I'm very optimistic about that. The question immediately becomes, how soon are we going to get there? I have no idea. And nobody really knows, but we can make some interesting predictions if we chart progress in processors, in hardware, in our capacity to emulate human performance. A lot of those curves kind of tend to converge around 2045. Ray Kurzweil is a director of engineering at Google, and he's known for making those charts. And some of his predictions in the past have been very accurate. He predicted the year then computers, for example, will become chess champions. So it looks like between 2023 and 2045, we'll start getting to the point where we can emulate a single human brain and we have neuro guys telling us later what that represents. But we'll get to the point where we can do it not just for one person, but for groups of people, for the whole civilization. We'll have machines which are greatly smarter than all of us combined. And of course, that will have some impact, not just jobs, not just unemployment, but maybe even more impactful. One thing we can observe is that today, with just regular software, not something super intelligent, we already surrendered a lot of control, if not most of the control, to those systems. Stock market is mostly automated. Military response systems, power grids, electrical plants, all that is already controlled by not so smart software. But systems are so complex, we can't really take control away. So we give up control, but we are not very good at controlling those intelligent systems. And that's kind of what my research is all about, figuring out how we can remain in charge while we are not the smartest species around. Another area of concern is just who is doing this type of research and who is funding this work. A lot of funding comes from kind of traditional government sources, NSF, but also we're looking at military. DARPA, IARPA are very interested in developing this technology for military purposes. What can we expect from them? Their goal is to develop very efficient killing machines, right? Hunting people, tracking them, figuring out targets automatically. At this point, it's not really the case that machines themselves decide on targets. We always have a human in the loop, analyzing data, pressing the button. But it's a logistical challenge. It doesn't have to be there. Technology itself allows the machine to decide on the perfect moment to strike. And because you have an arms race situation with other governments, a couple seconds really matter. Who shoots first? So it's not going to be surprising that this human in the loop gets removed from the equation. How will that impact, well, everything, how we conduct wars, how we conduct politics. So I gave you a few questions, and hopefully we'll get time for Q&A, and the panel will provide some answers.
All right, good evening. My name is Rob Willey. I'm the Advanced Manufacturing Engineering Leader for GE Appliances. So what does that mean? So I run an organization. We build all of our factories that build our products. So we talked a lot about in the future. I'm going to talk about kind of what's going on right now. So when we talk about manufacturing, we literally in all of our factories make literally tens of thousands of products every day. So it's got to work perfect every time we use that product, every time we use that robot or use that piece of equipment. So what's in R&D today, yeah, it's going to be, hopefully in the future, we'll be using a lot of that technology, but what we have today has to work every day. So I'm going to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about Industry 4.0. When I think of robotics, I think of it as a kind of a tool within a toolkit of digitization. So we've always, bent metal, molded plastic to make assembled products. What we've done in the last probably decade or so is put a digital layer over that whole process. From an information standpoint, from a data standpoint, a lot of these tools you're probably familiar with, from additive manufacturing to 3D simulations. And what we're going to talk about specifically, I'll talk about autonomous vehicles, and I'll also talk about robotics, and then also predictive analytics, which are tools that we're using today in our factories to make it more efficient. So, the question of why do we do this? Look, we work in an environment that's hyper competitive. It's the appliance industry. Our margins are single digit, meaning, for every $100 of product that we sell, we may make $3, $4, $5 per unit on that product. So every dollar counts. Every day we're trying to get a little bit better. And these are incremental steps that we take in continuous improvement every day. So the tools you saw on the previous page, those tools allow us to get better and to be more, to launch great products and also to make sure those products are cost competitive in the environment that we sell them in. So from a robotics standpoint, look, I started at GE about 21 years ago. And the day I walked in, we had robots just like this. And what's happened in the last few years is those robots, from a complexity standpoint, have gotten much simpler to operate and to program. The cost has come down dramatically. And from a reliability standpoint, they're highly reliable. So what does that mean? We take those three things right there and we look at applications as far as where we can actually implement this technology. And what we look at, we're not looking to go automate an entire assembly line where you walk into an environment and you see 100 robots shooting screws, assembling a product. What we look at is where can we impact the operator to protect the operator. And what we look at are four things. We call them the 4 Ds. So those are tasks that are dangerous, dirty, dull, and difficult. So dangerous, that'd be a situation where we actually have put an operator in harm's way, which we do not want to do. So maybe welding, maybe painting. Dirty, same thing there. Maybe we're spraying epoxy or spraying enamel, which goes in all of our products. Dull, so like I said earlier, we make tens of thousands of products a day. Some of those tasks to make those products are very, very mundane, very repetitive, and in some cases, just through the ergonomics of the repetition, can actually injure an employee. So that's where we target a lot of these applications. And the last one is difficult. The picture you see right here, this is almost a 300-pound refrigerator. This robot picks up over 1,000 times a day, and we have multiple applications in this particular factory. This is actually here in Appliance Park in Building 5. That's a bottom freezer refrigerator. So to actually pick up a unit and flip it around and move it around, that's physically impossible for a human to do. So this is where we target these applications, these tools that we've talked about here. So it's really about, how do we implement new processes to take advantage of these technologies? How do we improve the safety of the operator? And then finally, look, our operators are terrific problem solvers. When they're tasked with doing things that are dirty, dull, dangerous, or difficult, they're not solving problems. They're doing things that we really don't want them to be doing. So what this tool does, this allows us to free our operators up to go solve problems, do continuous improvement, launch great products, solve problems. So this is what robots really mean from a manufacturing standpoint today in the here and now. The next subject I want to talk about is autonomous vehicles. So you probably hear a lot about autonomous vehicles, Tesla, companies like that. Well, there's a halo effect as far as the technology goes. A lot of those sensors and the artificial intelligence and those the smarts, they're starting to make their way back into the factories in autonomous vehicles. So, 20 years ago when I started, we actually had what we called AGVs. These were automatic guided vehicles. When I mean automatic, they actually followed a wire that was in the floor. And what's happened in the last few years is they become autonomous. So we can take one of these robots. It actually comes with a PlayStation controller, literally like your kids play with. And you take it out of the box and you drive it around the environment, and using different laser or vision systems will actually map that environment within about an hour. And it actually creates a graphical picture of what that is. And you can actually program where its charge station is, where its first stop is, where its second stop is. So whatever that mission is that you want it to go do, you can just those simple highlights, and then from there it creates its own path and creates its own mission, and basically will avoid objects as well. So really cool tool, and what it does, if you think about material handling, you have an individual, an operator, an employee who is picking parts, putting them into a bin. Then that bin is transported a distance of whatever distance, and then something happens to that bin. So that problem solving of picking and selecting and knowing what to go do with it once it arrives at the workstation, I don't see that being automated anytime in the near future, but the actual transportation of that product, that's what we're trying to automate right now. So that's a terrific tool as well. And the last thing I want to talk about before I talk about our challenges as far as these technologies go is predictive analytics. So really what we're trying to do here is using various sensors, whether it's temperature, vibration, and mixing that in with some smarts as far as AI goes. How do you predict when something will break? So I talk about this from a robotics standpoint because we're really trying to automate a lot of that problem solving. This is kind of like an EKG of a piece of equipment. So a doctor looks at an EKG and looks at the patient and says, all right, you're going to have some issues. You need to go get this looked at. This is the same sort of technology, but with a piece of equipment. So we're taking that EKG of that piece of equipment. We're using some automation. We're making some decisions and saying, go do something to prevent it from breaking. So this is a terrific form of automation for us as well. So challenges as far as Industry 4.0 for us, it really comes down to talent and pipeline. Look, all those tools are great tools when you, from a business leader standpoint, saying, look, I want to go do that, go do this, go do this. Well, and we want to go invest in it. But the reality of it is the scarcity of the resources to go do it. The technology is changing so quickly. So what do we go do about it? We actually were talking about it before the session this morning about the STEM pipeline. Look, if you have any kids or friends or anyone who's interested in the STEM field, robotics, software, this whole field is something to get into. It's incredibly hot. It's very difficult to recruit in this field right now. And this is an area that we struggle with, but these are the things that we're doing to help solve some of those issues. The next issue is the skills gap. So, one thing, look, we're not going to go buy our way out of this problem. So a lot of it is finding that coach, hiring that person, that subject matter expert, and then upskilling our existing workforce, with that particular tool that we brought in. And then the last thing is, look, the technology is changing so rapidly. What you guys have forecast over the next decade, I mean, that stuff every year, every 2 years is constantly changing. So you're not going to go find a subject matter expert on that particular technology. You're going to go learn it yourself, find someone with the initiative and the aptitude to go learn it, and then teach it to everyone else. So those are the challenges. That's reality. So with that, I guess I'll hand it over here. So thank you.
Can you hear me? That's good. My name is David Sun. I'm a brain surgeon. I'm a neurosurgeon. And we're starting to use robotics in healthcare in the operating room. And I was going to show you some examples of that. I have a little video. I don't have a lot of great videos of things in the operating room, but we have this one little video that we made. So I'm just going to, can you get it to work? If you can't get it to work, we'll skip it because we can't make it. Skip it? All right. So forget the whole video thing. All right, but it's fine. So what I do is try to take care of people with brain tumors or uncontrolled seizures, a lot of different things in the brain. I'm specifically going to just talk a little bit about seizures because there's a lot of things that we do in the operating room that come nowhere close to what these guys are doing. Like what these guys are doing is where I want my stuff to be someday, okay? But there are three things that I want to try to get to really quickly that deal with robotics, and I don't want to say artificial intelligence because that's being way too strong compared to what these guys do. But for example, we have a robot in the operating room, and it's called ROSA, R-O-S-A. And what it is a GPS system. Okay, you all have a GPS system on your phone. I have a GPS system in the operating room that allows me to target very precisely locations in the brain. I used to be able to do that just fine, okay, with the GPS system, but now I have a GPS system that's got a robotic arm coupled to it. So it'll actually drive me to that location, and I'll try to show you how that works. We have instruments that once they're in the brain can be remote controlled, and we can make these submillimetric movements or these little twists and turns that honestly I can't make as precisely as the arm can, and I can do it from a different room, and I'll try to explain why that matters. And then we have some automated detection algorithms and things like that in healthcare. We've had some for a long time. Pacemakers essentially do that, okay? And we have some things coming out in my world, in the brain world. So the video was going to go through all this stuff, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. Epilepsy is a problem where people have seizures. I think most of you probably already know that. And it's a common problem. Most of you probably don't know that, okay? It affects about 1% of the US population. And just jumping around, about 250,000 patients have partial epilepsy that's intractable. And what that means is they have seizures coming from one location, and if we could find that location, maybe we could help them surgically. These are people who take medicines and the medicines don't work. So I try to show that graphically. If you look at all these dots, every one of these dots is 1,000 people, okay? So 250,000 people have epilepsy that can't be controlled with their medicine. It's actually more than that. That's a low estimate. About half of those patients are candidates for surgery, meaning half those patients, surgery might help them. And I live in a world where I do this every day, and the truth is, in the United States, we perform about 1,500 operations a year. So that's less than 2%. So less than 2% of the people that we could help with surgery for epilepsy actually get epilepsy surgery in the United States. Think about that. Okay, so less than 2% of people in the United States with breast cancer get treated for breast cancer. Does that make sense? Absolutely not. That would never happen. Less than 2% of the people that show up with a heart attack get treated for their heart attack. Would that ever happen? It does happen in epilepsy. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them are my fault. Okay, I need to do a better job of making people understand why we're doing it. I need to make people understand that surgery is not a last resort. Okay, I need to make people understand that suffering from seizures doesn't have to be their normal. That's part of my job. Okay, talking to patients about that. Patients are afraid of brain surgery. I'm afraid of brain surgery. Okay, who wants a big cut on their head? Who wants their head shaved? Who wants these kind of things? I actually had a patient tell me once, "I'm afraid you're going to make me a zombie." Now, if you want to insult a brain surgeon, say, "I'm afraid you're going to make me a zombie." So I looked this up. I call it the zombie effect. I'm working on this, okay? Confirmed mechanisms of zombie conversion. There's a virus called the solanum virus. I read about it in a book. I don't recommend it to anybody. And you can be bitten by a zombie, right? If you get bit by a zombie, you're going to turn. Brain surgery will not make anybody here a zombie. Okay? In fact, if you want to kill a zombie, destroy their brain. It's the opposite, all right? These little pictures come from a video game. Not appropriate for a 5-year-old. My son will attest to that. He had nightmares for about a week after I let him play that video game. All right, that's just joking around. So when we're trying to deal with seizures, and again, I'm talking about seizures, I'm coming to the robotics, I promise. Right? I need to sort of set the stage. When we're talking about seizures, we have to figure out where they're coming from. And once we figure out where they're coming from, we want to figure out, can we take that out? And I'm not going to go through all this nitty gritty, but the bottom line is we do all kinds of tests, we do all kinds of pictures, we do all kinds of exams. We do something called EEGs, where we stick these electrodes on your scalp, and we're basically measuring electrical activity in the brain, okay? Now, sometimes we do all those tests, and we still say, we're not sure where the seizure is coming from. And in that case, we actually have to do surgery just to figure out if we can do surgery. Just think about that. I got to tell a patient, I want to do surgery to try to fix your seizures, but I don't know where they're coming from, so I'm going to take you to the operating room first just to see if I can figure it out. That's not good, okay? Nobody likes that, but we do it sometimes. And what we used to do is things like this, okay? What we would do is make a big cut on your head, take off a big piece of bone, open the wrapper around your brain. I'm hopefully not grossing anybody out with that picture. And we would put these little sheets, these little plastic sheets with little metal electrodes on them directly on the brain surface. And then we put the bone back, and then we sew the skin back up, and we keep you in the hospital for a week or two, and we wait for you to have seizures, and we're recording the activity. And it's great. We get beautiful pictures, okay? Talk about your old-fashioned black and white TV with a coat hanger for an antenna, all right? Now compare that to the fancy, 4K high-definition TV. That's what the neurologists are looking at when they look at a regular EEG that's got to go through the scalp. It's about an inch, about a centimeter thick. The bone, which is about a centimeter thick. The wrapper around the brain just to get to this stuff. Plus, it only records on the surface. And I don't know if you know this, but the brain is made of hills and valleys. The way we pack more stuff in is hills and valleys and hills and folds and folds and folds. And these things, which are great, I used to do this operation all the time, okay? What these things do is they record on the surface. So you're looking on the surface of the water, but you're not looking down deep, okay? And you might miss something. So then ROSA came out, this robotic surgical assistant. And what it is, it's a GPS system with an arm attached to it. And what I can do is I can sit on a computer. I was actually doing it while the audience was walking in earlier. I can sit on a computer and I can plan a trajectory. I want my electrode, that's a listening device, to go into the brain, and I want it to end up over there, and I want it to start over there, and I don't want it to hit anything important and cause something bad, but I want to be able to listen to the surface of the brain, and I want to listen deep in the brain. And that's what this thing does. And ever since this came out, I started putting electrodes deep into the brain instead of just on the surface of the brain. It's completely revolutionized the way we look for these seizures, okay? And this is a, do I have a laser pointer on here? I do. This is a dime. You see the little black circle that I've put in the dime? That's the size of this hole that I make. Okay, I make a tiny stab cut in the skin. I make a tiny hole. It's like 2 or 3 pieces of spaghetti before you throw them in the pot. And we pass these electrodes. So all of a sudden, I go to my patient who's already afraid I'm going to make him a zombie. And I say, 4 years ago, I was going to make this, I was going to shave your head and make this massive cut on your head and pull your head out. You're going to be all swollen and you're going to hurt like crazy. And it's going to be really horrible, but it's going to be an awesome way to find your seizures. And now I tell them, we're going to make a bunch of little tiny stabs on your head. And they're going to be sore for a day, but it's not going to be all that bad. And we're going to pass these electrodes in. And when we take these electrodes out, we're going to close them up with a single stitch. And this is sort of a zoomed up picture of that. So patients have shorter hospital stays. They feel better. They recover faster. Instead of being out of work for weeks, they can go back to work a week later. And this is what it looks like. And I apologize for not having my video, but this is the robotic arm. You can see a computer here. And there's this robotic arm, and we made all these plans ahead of time. I can sit at home and, after the kids are going to bed and do this operation on the computer. And then what it does is it moves to its position, and I do my operating through this little instrument holder. So it's got a little, wrong button, instrument holder like this. And I do my operating through the instrument holder, and it gets me within a millimeter of where I want to be. The big deal here, I could actually do some of that before I had Rosa. Okay, before I had this robot, I could do some of that. It's just that every electrode I put in would take about 45 minutes. Now every electrode I put in takes about 3 minutes. Okay, and that's if we're not arguing about the music that we're playing in the background. Okay, so it really is so much faster for patients. So this is what it kind of looks like. This is just an X-ray, and you can see these little metal dots. Each of those is a little electrode. And it's sort of screwed into the skull, and they're all precisely placed exactly where we want them to be with the help of the robot. So this is what a CT scan looks like. This is a CT scan of a patient's head. You can see these electrodes here. We sort of put these fancy colors on it to make it easier to see. We superimpose that on an MRI scan so it's easier to see. And this yellow box that I've drawn, those electrodes, those blue ones there and those red ones there and the orange ones there, that's where the seizures were coming from on this patient. Okay, and we had to figure out if they're coming from the right side of the brain or the left side of the brain. So that would have been 2 big surgeries simultaneously. Very risky surgery. Most patients wouldn't let me do it. Most surgeons would say, maybe it's not worth it. And all of a sudden, patients that we used to turn away were calling back. Okay, all because of robotics. So once we figure out where the seizures are coming from, and if we can safely take it out, we take it out. And in my world, just like these guys are always looking to improve things, we're trying to always improve things. Okay, our first surgeries were big surgeries, were in the early 1900s, and we're constantly trying to create more finesse, more elegance. So what we would do for that guy in the past is, you see this, we would make this cut here, see this question mark shape? That's the incision. We take off a piece of bone, and this green area, we would take all that out. All we really, I heard somebody groan. All we really wanted to take out was this area here. But we'd take all that out because it was in our way. So then we got better, and we started making smaller incisions like this. And we made smaller cuts in the bone. And then what we would do is we'd make a small cut in the brain, and we would just take out that area. See, here's a patient of mine where we just took out that area. I don't know how well it projects, but you can see this little dark area that's gone. That was where the seizures were coming from. So now I have a new robotic tool, okay? And it's called NeuroBlate, that's the name of it. But basically, it's laser therapy. Everybody always says, are you going to use lasers? My entire residency said, when are you guys going to start using it? I actually use lasers now, okay? So we have a laser probe. We use ROSA. We drill a hole. This is the size of a hole. Again, it's a very small hole in the head, okay? It's less than a centimeter. And what we do is we use that navigation system to perfectly place this laser pointer into the brain. And then we go down to the MRI scanner, and this is what the laser pointer, this is a cartoon obviously, but you can give it, like for example, this laser here, the energy comes off the side. And we can pass that into the brain where we want it to be. And then I can't be in the MRI scanner while an MRI is being done. I have to be in another room. So I go into the other room and I sit at a computer, and I have a little thing where I basically, I want it to move forward a millimeter deeper into the brain. I move it on this computer screen, and you know what? A little robotic driver moves it in. I want it to turn. We're using the laser on this side, and we want to hit more over here. We're going west, we want to go north. I turn it, all on the computer screen. If we had to go in and out and in and out and in and out and make those adjustments, first of all, those adjustments wouldn't be exactly where I want them to be. And the operation would take 12 times as long because every time we have to go in there, we have to reset everything. So if you look at this, all right, this is that patient I showed you. This is that area I told you that where the seizures were coming from. This is what it looked like after we lasered that area right here. Compare that to an open craniotomy. It's the same thing. It looks like we did the same thing. This person went home the next day. This person spent 3 nights in the hospital. This person's got bad headaches for a while. Okay. This is the size of the incision. This is a centimeter. It's less than a centimeter incision. These are things that we can do now. Am I way over time? I am way over time, aren't I? I knew the answer before I asked. All right, last thing I want to mention. Sometimes we can't take that area out. In the old days, we do all that work and we would say, sorry, there's nothing we can do. Now we have a device that we actually implant in the brain, and we make a little window we take a little window of bone out of the skull and we put a little computer in there. And then we pass an electrode into the area where the seizures are coming from. And what that device does is it's constantly recording electrical activity from where the seizures are coming from. It's constantly listening. Constantly listening. It's constantly waiting to smell smoke before the fire. It's constantly looking for patterns to say, oh, a seizure is coming. And every night the patient downloads that information to God knows where. They call it the cloud. I don't know what that really means, but it goes somewhere. And it's analyzed. And then they can set parameters where when the seizure is about to start and the computer is recording it, it'll recognize the pattern and it'll pass back a little bit of electricity that'll shut off the seizure. We didn't have this before. I had patients we sent away. And with this device, they're starting to do tons of research. They have tons of recordings of people's brains that they never had before. And they're inputting all this data and they're looking at people who did really well and they're looking for patterns. And what they want, and these guys would have to explain how it's actually happening because I don't know, but they're inputting all this information and the machine is recognizing the patterns and it's starting to set the settings by itself. Okay, so you don't need the neurologist. You don't need to come to the neurologist's office. The goal is that this little computer will start to recognize patterns and say, yo, your pattern is like these 300 patients that we've treated before, and we set these 300 patients on blue, yellow, green, so I'm going to set you on blue, yellow, green and see how you do. Or it's going to look at your seizure patterns and it's going to say, when your seizure ends, your brain starts to do this little funny thing. I'm going to replicate that little funny pattern just whenever I feel like it and see if I can stop the seizure from, if I tell, if the stop sign comes up and waves, I'm just going to wave it to you whenever I can. So these are all different things that we do, and they're all robotics. All right, I apologize for going over.
Get a mic on. Thank you. My name's Kerry Wong. I'm from Humana. If you look at my name, it's spelled W-A-N-G, but it's pronounced Wong. So if you say Wang, you're Wong. It's by far and away the best way to remember me. And I would like to thank Roman very much so because he took the mic off of this thing. Because when I first walked in, I was sitting there going, I'm like 5 feet tall. You could never see me behind this thing. There's no way I could reach the mic in the first place. So thank you very much for that as well. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm here to talk about what we do with robotics at Humana, particularly intelligent automation. You hear all about these various things in AI. There's a whole bunch of terms that you hear thrown around AI. I'm going to hone in on one that we do. It's called intelligent automation. And for me, I really need things really simple. I'm not smart like all these other fine gentlemen in this up on this panel. I need things really simple for me. So I needed a simple explanation of what is intelligent automation. So I'll break it down into a few different things. What intelligent automation is data science. Data science is using all the really smart math that people do, and they look at data, typically unstructured data, and what they're doing is they're using math to find the patterns in the data to create algorithms. And these algorithms do a couple different things. They either make classifications, is this a picture of a dog, is this a picture of a cat? Or it makes predictions. Say, okay, if I know all these data points, I can predict this other one here in the future. So data science, to me, again, in my simple mind, really does one of those two different things. So why is that important for artificial intelligence? First of all, I'd make an argument that it's really the data science is what is the underlying mechanism that fuels artificial intelligence. It's the thing that gets all the classification. It builds all the models for us. It builds the algorithms, things like that that help machines make these decisions. So why is that important for intelligent automation? So data science, we've had data scientists, you could argue, for 50, 60, 70 years or more. So why is artificial intelligence big now? My argument is that is because of the revolutions in the hardware and the software that is out there that enables us to go do this. So we have the cloud, this magical cloud thing that everyone uses, enables so much more processing power today than it ever did before. We have so many more advances in hardware, GPUs instead of CPUs, that we can process so many more things so much faster than we ever could before. So that has allowed a new software called virtual data scientists to exist. So instead of having people that would take months to look at this data, create algorithms, to create predictions, to collect classifications, we now have software called virtual data scientists utilizing hardware that we now have that can create these predictions for us in a matter of minutes or hours. Okay. So intelligent automation is taking the utilization of these virtual data scientists and saying, okay, so I have all this unstructured data. I'm going to create a training data set. A training data set is nothing more than a data set that says, here's all the right answers and here's all the wrong answers. I'm going to push this training data set through this virtual data scientist, and it's going to use a whole bunch of mathematical formulas, and it's going to create algorithms for me that match up the training data set with some level of certainty. And what we're going to do with that is say, okay, now that if we can create these models, these algorithms, we're going to take these algorithms off this unstructured data, and we're going to create software bots to then go take actions on top of it. So an example would be, can you imagine having, and this exists today because you have spam filters, imagine a robot that would take all your emails that you got, it would read them for you, and it would extract the key bits of data, and it would do something for you, right? It could put it in a spam folder. It could respond, I never want to hear from you again. It could respond, that sounds like a great idea, right? It could do those things. So that would be a great example for me for what intelligent automation is. It's taking a bunch of unstructured data, it's you creating models using virtual data science to go figure this out, create models about what to go do, and then it's creating software bots that once you know what to go do, to go and do it. And then you hear the term thrown out, well, the machine learning on top of all that. So again, for my simple mind, all the machine learning is once you put these models into place, once you put these algorithms into place, you're going to record the right and the wrong answers, and then you're going to push that back through. The algorithm is not going to be 100%. It's going to be 80%. It's going to be 70%. It's going to be 90%. So you're going to have people, most likely, that are going to be taking a look at the output for that and saying, is this right or is this wrong? You're going to take those right and wrong answers, feed that back into the training data set, run the virtual data scientist all over again, and it's going to say, I have a new, better algorithm that you can use that hits this training data set better. Go deploy that. That's all machine learning is, right? Okay, so first of all, I need to simplify that for me, and then I understood, okay, now I see what we're doing. So at Humana, what we're trying to do is, I don't remember who it was, I think it might have been Roman that said the machines are going to take over and replace everyone's jobs, which absolutely people think that. We don't think of it that way at Humana. The way we think of it is we have phenomenal people that work for us. Those people do a wide variety of jobs. We don't have one person that all day takes a paperclip from over here to over here. They do a multitude of things. So what we're trying to do is we're using intelligent automation to look at the worst, most boring, most manual tasks, similar to the way GE was looking at that, right? And how do we create bots, software bots that help do those tasks for those individuals so they can concentrate on doing things that make a difference to other people, right? To creating a different consumer experience for those individuals. So we're looking at the tasks that people are doing. Do we have somebody whose sole job is to read emails, let's call it that for a second, of people and deciphering, is this spam or is this really a member that's writing us that we need to go do something? So we're looking at things like that, that's looking, okay, let's figure out, can we create an intelligent automation and models to go after that and automate that process. So then we have people that could concentrate on responding to those consumers' concerns and questions as opposed to reading the email, okay? Did I hit the wrong button? I hit the wrong button, I'm sorry. You're right, this is very anti-intuitive. So this is kind of really, so if you're going to look at all our different industries, and we have great academic industries, we have phenomenal medical and appliance manufacturing ones. So really, what are we looking at doing? So we're really looking at applying automation, intelligent automation. We call it that because In part, we're trying to add intelligence, and we're not specific to doing it in one area. We're trying to do it all across our enterprise. And what we're really trying to do is find the key areas in our business. Where are our key pain points within our business that we can apply intelligent automation, where that we can make a difference in the associate experience, similarly to GE, I think you guys are looking at the same thing, or the consumer experience. Could we automate something that the consumer wants to do for us to push back to them? And that's really what we're at. That's what we're trying to do at Humana. That's what we're doing at Humana, bit by bit. Okay. So the last question that I typically get is, first of all, we don't have walking, talking robots roaming around in Humana like you do in other places. By the way, that's the first question I got every time I talked about robotics at Humana was, so how are we going to care for this from a physical space perspective? And I said, we don't. Ours are software. All right. So, but we've been doing this. We've been doing robotics and automation for years, right? Back, before 1990, you'd call it straight-through processing. You have a very defined set of rules. You write those rules in code, and systems go process that. So from the 1990s into 2017, we really were looking at how do we take that to the next level when we did desktop automation. That's creating software bots that sit on someone's desktop. So you hit a button and it goes and does something for you, right? Or there's a task that's got to be done and it's got to be done overnight. So you batch it all up and then this robot does it all overnight. Magically the next day you could walk in and it's all done for you. So where we're focusing in now, starting in 2017 and into today, is the intelligent automation that I was talking to you about. And that's really talking about how can we look at data science and virtual data science and putting this robotic process automation that we've been doing for the last 17 years together in order to deliver new value with these algorithms and the machine learning that we have, capabilities we have today. And that's all that I have.
Thank you. Let's hear it for these guys one more time. Fantastic. All right, I think we do have time for a few questions. Real quick, I'll kick us off. The one thing that whether we're talking about physical robots or we're talking about algorithms, people do get nervous about both of those things, right? Things that they can't control. And there's this idea of algorithmic aversion where it's like there's been some studies done where in most cases humans will respond to another human or want to take the advice of another human before a robot if they don't, if you give them a choice. Hey, Dr. Popa says this, but this robot who has all this data and all this other knowledge that he doesn't have, as smart as the guy is, says this. In most cases, the human goes, well, I want to go with the other human, not with the robot, right? So how do you help a nervous workforce or a nervous consumer base, in the case of Humana, get used to that? That was a good question.
I'm glad that everyone's jumping to answer this question, so I'll jump in first. For us, our core interactions at first we're continuing to not focus on the core interactions being a bot plus to the consumer. What we're trying to do is enable the associates to interact with consumer themselves as opposed to searching. So let me make this up for a second. And this isn't a real use case. I'm going to make it up as an example. You call into a call center, right? Let's say you call it any call center. You have a question like, where is this? Or I'm looking for this. How can I buy this service? How can I buy this product or something like that? And then the person on the line might say, okay, hold on a second. And what they're going to go do is they're going to say, hold on, they're going to go interact with their systems and go search for information, go search for the thing that you asked them to go find. Then they're going to go find, and they're going to say, well, here's this thing that I found, and I'm going to read this back to you, right? What we're looking at trying to do is instead of having the associate have to go through, oh, I know what you're asking for. I know this catalog. I know I'm going to go over here to this system in this catalog to go find this information. What we're looking is trying to put AI in front of the associate to help them say, okay, ask the AI the question. They're going to help you find the data. They're going to push that data back to you. You're going to evaluate, oh, that's right. And then you're going to go deliver that to the consumer. So really shortening that time and that span and the mental energy that associate has in their head around all the cataloging and making the machine do that work so that the human can still have the interaction with the human and hopefully a better, more accurate interaction as well.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and add from a physical automation perspective, when you talk about robots in the factory, I mean, it is intimidating. It could be perceived as threatening as well. But when you look at the type of roles that we do automate, I mean, they're the least desirable jobs out there. In some cases, they're physically impossible. In some cases, you're highly likely to be injured if you're on the job. And those are the jobs we want to automate. So I think when you see the track record there, and I think that is reassuring to the associate that, look, we're focused on these types of jobs. And you also look at the complexity of the product that we make, almost to the level of it's almost customized in some cases. In some buildings, in some product lines, we make every model every day. And the level of decision making that's required to do that on an assembly line is incredible. And when you think about what a robot can do, it's nowhere even in that realm. So robots are very good at moving something from point A to point B, highly repetitive, but they're not good at saying, well, this is a 26-inch cubic refrigerator or a 29 cubic foot refrigerator, and I do this one on this one and that one on that one. And then, by the way, it's not at the same place every time. So you add that layer of complexity on top of that, and you look at what the individual brings to the table, and that's the problem-solving ability to deal with those tasks on a regular basis. So it's really two things. So, we're always going to need great problem solvers on the factory floor. That's our associates, and there's also tasks that we really do not want our associates doing, and that's where we want to automate.
One other question I had is, Dr. Sun, how much gap do you give yourself between playing Left 4 Dead 2 and planning a brain surgery for the next day? Seems like you would need a little bit of a gap, right? Like
3-4 minutes.
Okay, good. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
In the 50 or so years of the computer's history, we've gone through numerous centralizations and decentralizations. Would any of you data scientists wish to predict about what artificial intelligence is going to do as far as driving decentralization or higher centralization? For example, if you take applications like facial recognition technology, there's an obvious security concern and interest or possible benefit there. But obviously, if that sort of thing got centralized by governments, it would have hugely successful, and it is being centralized by governments like China right now, as a matter of fact. Or take, for example, traffic control, that sort of thing. To what extent would we benefit from having automated sensors on cars and having traffic control? And back to the point about memory, to what extent are you memory and processor bound currently with current architectures and that sort of thing? So I'm looking to hear all discuss that.
I guess I'll try this. So this is not just AI. I think blockchain technology is what's going to do a lot for decentralizing all those applications and merging it with AI. We're starting to see whole frameworks where people develop intelligent applications for different blockchain networks. And for example, SingularityNet has this idea in mind that will have different developers creating apps for their framework, and they all play together, but at the same time, it is decentralized. You can shut it down, you can control it. So there is a lot of interest in making it work this way, but it's a lot slower, it's a lot more expensive right now. It's kind of like early days of the internet. It's going to be a while before we get to Google's from Alta Vistas, you know what I mean? So for now, I think government still has upper hand on that, but Bitcoin is up to 8,000 today, so.
Any other questions in the room? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear the panel's opinion on the impacts to our local employment in the medium to medium term, especially given some of the challenges we have in our school systems to create and attract the type of talent needed, particularly in advanced manufacturing, as advanced manufacturing and artificial intelligence replace a lot of human work.
All right, so I actually have a very positive outlook on this. Basically, the way you're going to use these robots or interact with these robots is much easier than playing a video game. So if the kid can play a video game, they will be able to work with the robot collaboratively. So from a usage standpoint, there's no change. How it's going to impact the local economy, I think, is also going to be in a positive way. First of all, more robots in factories will keep the factories operating and profitable. And so there will be some jobs. And I've heard people from GM R&D told me more than once that if it was not for the robots, all these jobs will be gone. There will be none of them in the United States. So I think it's good. Also in healthcare, we prefer humans in healthcare. There will be some robots in healthcare, but not that many, maybe 1 to 50 people. It's not going to be the opposite, which is what you see in manufacturing. So healthcare won't be affected, but for the better. So I don't know if that addresses your question. So I'm pretty optimistic. In terms of the complexity and the pipeline, the STEM pipeline, there's obviously issues. But I think the cool factor, by using video game analogies, I think will, it helps.
Yeah, I'm just glad my 6-year-old's not here, because what I heard was play more video games. That's what he would have heard, and that would not fly. That would not fly. To that point, and I think that's a great question. I mean, it's in Future Shock, Alvin Toffler says something about in the 21st century, he said this in 1970, in the 21st century, illiteracy is going to be not being able to unlearn, relearn, and learn again. So to that point, what are specifically GE, Humana, what are you guys doing to train people to think that way, to unlearn, relearn? And, are there job programs? Are there specific cultures being in place?
Yeah, so it's a couple different facets. So one, you have, the traditional classroom environment, which is, it basically gives you a little bit of foundation on the theory behind it, but really it's through experiential learning. It's through apprenticeship programs. It's through partnerships with different STEM programs. We've got a very strong apprenticeship program within our own business, where we've taken people from our production roles and put them in these apprenticeship programs to go learn these technical skills. In cases where we have introduced automation, what's been really fascinating is, back to the job growth perspective, is in those departments we've introduced a lot of automation. We've actually grown in our headcount, in our employment levels, because we've been able to be more efficient, and we're able to bring more work in. We're able to offer products more cost effectively to our consumer and our customers as well. So our volume is going up. So it's a win-win-win there. And we're in those departments where we do introduce that technology. We're actually creating a career path for our associates that used to just drive screws or catch parts and pack parts, and now they're interested in, look, I can apply some simple problem-solving skills and maybe a little bit learn some new technology and grow and actually get levels of certifications or accreditations that are recognized within the industry and have a career. And before, we didn't have that. It was just very basic, mundane, repetitive type tasks.
Yeah, I'd make an argument that I think Humana has very much embraced, I'll call it, change-related culture, generally speaking. I'd say that we believe that, the world that we started in 60 years ago now at this point in time, being nursing homes, has really changed. And we as a company have changed, and we really as a culture embrace change for ourselves as well as all our associates. I'd say I could be I'd argue that I'm a good example of that. I've been there 16 years. I started over in operations, and then I've spent the last 8 years in IT, and now I'm doing artificial intelligence. So I think that we really try to embrace the growing of the associate through what there's interest in them, and as our business change and our needs change, to allow them to go do so as well.
Any other questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
This is a machine learning research question. A lot of the model architectures that have come out, convolution, recurrent, and general adversarial, have all been created like 3 to 4 years ago. Are we headed for an AI winter, or are we going to have new architectures, like new models?
I think that's a fantastic question that I also was wondering was, to its point, there's been this, if you study AI, they kind of popularly, they will say that there's all this momentum, and then there's some sort of issue that causes a lack of enthusiasm, funding dries up. It happened in the 70s, it happened again in the late 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, and now we're hearing about it. It feels like we're hearing about it everywhere. We're writing about it at Insider. We're constantly, having these kind of conversations and hosting these kind of panels. Is this something, are we at a tipping point where it's just, we're going to continue, or is there going to be a drop off of this at some point?
So it is a great question. There is a lot of debate about that. If you studied history of AI, very first kind of AI projects were exactly neural networks, perceptron and things of that nature. And then for 20, 30 years, we tried our things, and we got AI winter. It seems that what's different this time is that we kind of reached this point of no return in terms of funding. It used to be so government constrained. Like if government didn't fund it, you couldn't make it work. But now industry is probably bigger funder of that between Google and Facebook. They're definitely not going to stop making so much money and driving this forward. So more data, faster processing, pretty much the same algorithms can get you a lot more if you just give it a lot more power. You emulating human brain, right? I have this chart where we talk about how soon will we get to human level performance. That's Moore's law. You can project exactly where we're going to get to each level of capability. So I'm optimistic in that we're going to get there too soon. So mine's for the whole panel, but it's by a show of hands. Who thinks that within 35 years you'll have, instead of like a phone or something, that you'll have some sort of direct connection to a computer or all computers in your head?
Only if I put it in, right?
When he puts it in, yes.
Yeah. So we need to talk financially, guys. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment. I think that will happen. Nobody's afraid of your cell phone and you use it every day. It'll be much easier if you had an implant to operate it, right? So I think the same will happen with robots. Once you go to Sears, buy a robot, bring it home, and if it can do something for you, you won't be able to live without it. So yes.
Yeah, I had a question. Would you guys have any advice for a student trying to pursue additive manufacturing or industrial engineering? And would now be a great time to start learning that, even though that there's rapid change in the industry, or would the rapid change kind of prohibit the current learning?
Yeah, so I'll chime in there. I'm an industrial engineer, and I also work in industry, so I think it's really right up my alley as far as, look, what we do today from a manufacturing standpoint, we still bend metal, we still shoot, mold plastic, but everything else continues to change every year, every couple of years. And really it's about, do you have the aptitude to learn? Are you curious? And do you have the initiative? If you have those three and you have the fundamental concepts and you understand what manufacturing is, you can grow into any job. I tell a lot of friends this, that, GE is probably 80% of the workforce there are engineers, and maybe 20% of them actually do engineering. But what happens over time is people learn new skills, and if you have the fundamentals of the business and fundamentals of manufacturing in operations, you can do an incredible amount. My background's industrial. I'm starting to get in more into this robotics space, clearly out of my wheelhouse, but just through exposure and through experiential learning and participation in doing it, that's how I learned. That's how I'm geared, not in classroom environments, but more of just go and do it. So I would jump at it, and if you have an opportunity to do a co-op, an internship, get tied up, get hooked up with a company, do it. Take advantage of it. Don't look for that perfect time to jump in, because now is the perfect time to jump in.
We are tight on time. I'm gonna end with one more question, and that is, besides Artificial Superintelligence by Dr. Ian Polsky, which I hear is on sale now if you want to read further about this, are there any books that you would recommend for people to check out if they want to read further about this? That's part one of the question. Part two is, well, and on a fun note, who's your favorite sci-fi writer? Go. Yeah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so my favorite sci-fi writer is Philip K. Dick. Blade Runner is a movie that was, so you have a lot of great books. In terms of books that I would recommend, there's an interesting book by an MIT grad called The God in the Machine, and talks about, religion. So she's a religious major, but wrote a book about why we are fascinated with robots and the fact that we want to recreate ourselves. And in my case, I can tell you that that was one reason I chose robotics, because I know I will have research to do for the rest of my life and not be able to finish it, right? So,
So science and science fiction have been separated by hundreds of years before. Now it's more like 50-20 and it's converging. When it hits together, that's singularity, right? When whatever we come up with is already done and technology is there. So the books I would recommend, books by Ray Kurzweil. He's great at predicting future of science, but it reads like science fiction. So check him out, and I have a new book coming out in August.
All right, so I'll be a little less on the sci-fi side and more on the manufacturing side. I go back to the fundamentals of manufacturing. It's the Toyota way. So it's the machine that changed the world. If you learn the fundamentals, you know, technology changes and continues to evolve. If you do not have a basis of learning and a basis of how manufacturing or operations works, you really have no application for the toolkit that's being provided to you. So you've got to have that foundation. So that's the book I'd recommend.
So they like that one. All right. So I'm sadly going to admit that I haven't read a book for pleasure in about 15 years.
He's been busy with the Left 4 Dead too. It's cool. It's cool. He's really good at zombie video games.
Right. I'm gonna kind of ignore the question and answer one that I wanted to anyway. The last book that I'll call it the last book that I read was called The Confidence Code, and it's really about women. And it's about women in the workforce and the differences between women and men in the workforce, and how confidence in the way the society operates really creates at times an unbalanced environment, as evidenced perchance. Sorry to pick on us, by the panel of all men, but it'd be great to have more women in that. So The Confidence Code, I think, was a phenomenal book to read.
All right, thank you. Let's hear it for the panel one more time. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate your support of Insider Louisville. If you are not already a member, if you are and you think, you know what, my company should help support what Insider's doing too, you can find out more about how to do either of those things when you go to joininsider.com. We made it really easy for you. Thank you. Good night.